James Jowsey, thanks very much for doing this. Emma McQuaid is obviously gearing up for her 400th CrossFit Games season. I guess the most pertinent thing to ask you about is we've recently had the news of semi-final allocation spots have decreased for Europe. Does that increase any pressure? Does it change anything? Is the job at hand still the same?
I mean, it increases pressure because I think it's fair to say that Europe is the most dense region. So why it's been reduced is just baffling. Like when you've got European athletes who are in the top 100 in the world in quarterfinals qualification who don't even make it into their region, just shows it doesn't. Sorry, region. I'm old school. Semi-final. Doesn't even make it into that semi-final category. Shows the density of the field, and that's the pressure of being a European athlete, male or female. Is the field is stacked, more stacked than any other region. Yes, America is stacked when you put the two together, but separately, they're not. That whole field isn't stacked, which is why when you get to the games, you see the European athletes finish in the top. They all finish in that top portion, and then that bottom portion is filled up with your less competitive regions.
With Emma, obviously, she didn't have the season that she wanted last year. She was kind of, it seemed like holding things together for as long as she could, and then just unfortunately the games, it just didn't work out that she wanted to. She had her injury. It was nothing to do with her neck, was it? It was kind of a nerve in her neck. Is that right?
Yeah, so it was a ligament injury within the neck, and the swelling was putting pressure on the nerve, which was then shutting down the strength in the arm.
Okay.
So yeah, it was complex to manage on the way into the games, and things were coming back, but we hadn't been able to touch the volumes of movements of the high skill, high strength movements that we needed to, and so the games it was just an overload, and it just brought the injury back. And then we've spent a long time this season has pretty much been 70% rehabilitation, 30% performance, and things are now like starting to grow. There's still elements where we're lacking from where we were performance wise at a peak last year. But yeah, we're happy with where we're at now, and things are turning the corner. And yeah, it's been challenging.
With a season like this, then, like I was up with Emma a couple of weeks ago, and she spoke about how she has kind of reverted back to that Wadapalooza year, and to the build up to that, which is probably her most successful, or her certainly her most commercially successful and financially successful competition that she's done. And it was an amazing performance back then. And then she's trying to replicate that, I guess, with the game season this year. Is that accurate? Like trying to build a similar program around the season?
Yeah, she just really likes the structure and kind of the build that we did over that kind of 9-12 week block. Obviously, she's got positive emotions around that block, positive experience. So I can argue from the physiological standpoint that she's a different athlete, and maybe other things would be more beneficial now. But we can never sports 80% psychological, right? So doing something that builds the confidence in the athlete and having that conversation, like here's me coming with physiological science and there's psychological science and what the athlete believes and feels and wants, and you've got to try and find the best of that. So yes, here's a skeleton of where we were in Wadapalooza year, but now we've just got McQuaid 2024, higher outputs, higher strength, higher capacities than she had then. So yeah, it's been going well. It's been going well.
When you look at the programming for semi-finals, is there, you're kind of a guy who runs on an even keel, so I doubt you get too excited or too downbeat about any of the workouts, but is there any that stand out as like, okay, we can do a bit of damage there versus that one, we probably need to just hold things together there?
No, I think last year was damage limitation year. Like it was so heavily heavy based, excluding the strict legless rope climbs with legless descent and handstand pirouettes. But I think you saw like the cardiovascular workout became all about who pulled the sled the best, and it was done a ski erg and an assault runner, which is driven by mass. So that was pretty much, although it was fitness, it was driven by the predominance of being heavy, then changes the field of who's more likely to finish in that top tier. Like we know, thankfully, there's no assault runner this year. Like the athletes know, and there's enough evidence in the coaches to go, well, I've got an athlete here who outruns an athlete on the actual normal Earth surface, and they put them on a machine, and then the times flip around. Like we can't say that that's a test of fitness; it's a test of mass. Being someone who has mass and is relatively fit, being able to beat somebody who is actually just fitter. So last year was damage limitation. Like looking at these, it is more. I mean, we don't know all the nitty gritty details. Like that handstand walk one, is that just a straight up handstand walk race, or are they going to stick some circus acts in it? I think it's fairly balanced. I've got WOD 1, 5 rounds time run clean and jerk. That is fitness. The barbells a reasonable cycling speed for the top athletes. So that will just be who can sustain that workload. You're not going to have that bottleneck on work there. Likewise, WOD 2. I think 100 double unders for the best athletes is not necessarily recovery when you stick it in that kind of workout. Like it is going to give something into the shoulders for the toes to bar, and then into the front squat, and then the legs are going to come off the front squat. So that's just going to be a nice, again, who can tolerate the sustained pace. Handstand walk, rope climb. The rope climb workout. That's a gymnastic workout, but now we've got the balance with the snatch. So we've got a gymnastic test, a snatch test, 2 fitness tests. Raw handstand walk will depend. I think, like I say, on that handstand walk, I think obviously you've got male versus female. It's the same distance. So you're basically going to, males versus females, the row obviously decides it. So men are coming in at quicker times than women just based off the row. So that would then suggest that if you've got a good rowing female, it's potentially going to be decided by the row. Depends what they do with the handstand walk rules. Obviously, we just don't know there yet. And then the last one, I don't know. I'm undecided on that one as to what will be the outlying factor on it. If that weighted lunge is the weighted lunge the decider based on the different distance and it being the heaviest dumbbells we've seen. So do people come off at the muscle ups at the same time, and then it's just about who does the lunges the fastest? I don't know. So I think across it's one of the most balanced. Like it is appears to be one of the most balanced semifinals has been tests in a while, because you've got to look at each test individually and then as a part of what it's made up of, to then see. And if you see a demographic of athlete, which we did see last year, it was heavier athletes who then got to the games and they can't ride a bike and they can't run and they're all the way down at the bottom of the field in the endurance events. It's like, if we want to find that argument of we want to find the fittest person in the world, it's like, well, I want to find the fittest person in the world, the fittest all-round athlete in the world against the fittest all-round athletes. I don't want to find the fittest against the fittest strong people or the fittest gymnastics people, which is what we saw in 2019 with all the chippers. That when all the cuts, it just became Tia versus the fittest gymnasts, excluding Amanda Barnhart, who did exceptionally well.
When you approach semifinals with an athlete like Emma, is it basically just, I don't care if she's first or 10th, once she's passed this test, it's irrelevant?
Yeah, you're just going in there, like, at the end of the day, the goal of CrossFit is not having a gap, like having that sway in the leaderboard. It is about who just stays in the mix in all the workouts. If someone's got some home runs, which again we saw that last year, people had home runs in event 1 and then couldn't do a ring muscle up with a weighted vest on, and then still almost qualified for the games. Like you can't have those gaps. Well, if the program's balanced, then yes, it's okay. But it's just about just taking each event at a time. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much sprint training Emma does. She can't beat Usain Bolt in a 100-meter race. So we've just got to go, right, we know what we can do. We hit that. Where do we fall in the pack? Right, move on, deliver the next workout. And at the end of the weekend, are you looking at the leaderboard? Yes, of course you are. It is nature. It brings that thing. But all it takes is a judge's call, and it all judge's call on choose your movement that takes too long, an unbroken handstand walk distance, and then that's 30 seconds gone from a workout.
Yeah.
So that sport, that happens. You've just got to roll with the punches.
If you were to put a percentage on it, compared to, we'll say I'm at or peak, maybe that Wadapalooza competition is like that's peak McQuaid, and then obviously the games last year wasn't peak with the injury and stuff. If you were to put a percentage of her capacity and performance at the minute heading into semi-finals, is she operating at like 90%, 100%? Where do you feel she is?
She's in that kind of 85+% now, but I'd argue like there's elements that she's way better athlete. Like on the machines now, she's turning out numbers that she's never been able to turn, because that's the only thing we were ever in that first portion that wasn't putting any pressure on the neck and affecting the arm. Like she's on machine wise fitter than she's ever been. So that is up. That one I'd give it a 100%. Likewise, leg strength is the best it's been. It's just kind of like that all round exposure to everything. We're still looking at getting some of the volumes back on the ring muscle ups, for example. Are
you confident by the time
climbs? They're looking great.
Are you confident by the time the games come around, all going to plan, it'll be 100%? Like, is she trending upwards on the returning to full capacity? Yeah, okay.
Completely, Liza. This has been looking at this, like semi-finals could be programming wise, could have been worse.
Yeah.
For us personally, in a sense of what she's been able to test and things like that. So we've had a what do you want to call it? A look. Yeah, lucky at this point that everything is within things that we've been able to work on and develop now. And then there's a couple of bits that are missing, but they'll be back come the games, especially with having 12 weeks, which is going to be the first time ever, and probably the last time, because they'll see that Europe dominate with having longer time to prepare. So they'll probably switch it next year so America do better.
Yeah.
No, I'm cynical.
So John Singleton, from the program, an update on your athletes. We'll start on the male side for Europe. So you've got Toby Fox, Luka Vujnik, and Moritz Fiebig. 3 athletes, I guess, at different stages of their careers, I guess. And what Moritz is aiming to go back again every year. He seems to improve every year and shore up little weaknesses that he has every year. Is that still you on track with that progression this year, do you feel?
Exactly. For Moritz, it was quite clear. If he wants to progress at the games, we need to get his conditioning to a better place, and that's been the focus throughout this year. So, now it's time to start seeing if it's paid off.
Is he confident? I spoke to him the other day for something else, Heat 1, and he seems like in good form and good spirits. He seems kind of like chilled out and like pretty relaxed, really.
Yeah, I think Moritz is a great competitor, actually. We spent quite a few years with him now, and often in high pressure moments. I think a good example was when he first qualified in Berlin. Lowlands going through, and he was walking out. He was outside of qualifying at that moment, but he just holds a really positive mindset. He holds it that he can achieve it, he can go through, and that's been really nice to witness. Some athletes can really take themselves down. They make a little mistake, and it's something that can bug them throughout the whole weekend. Whereas he really manages to take a great mindset when competing. So it's exciting to watch him. And I think, as you said before, he's a great showman. He just loves being on the floor, and I think he does it for the crowd as well, which is fun and exciting to see as a spectator.
So he's had 4th in Lowlands, 3rd in Berlin, so surely 2nd or 1st in Lyon. That's the aim, right?
I am not going to argue with that logic.
Luka Vujicic then, who's maybe at a different kind of level than Moritz. He's someone whose condition, probably the polar opposite, his conditioning is incredible. Like, he's incredibly fit. How do you feel his preparation has gone, and is he sitting in a good place heading into France?
Yeah, Luca's in great shape, and he'll be one of the dark horses to watch going in. Not a lot of people know Luca. He's not necessarily put himself on the radar. He's obviously been close a few years, and this is an opportunity for him to have a breakthrough. One thing is, for the people who are, as we go into the weekend, like, Europe is stacked. And there's been a lot of talk about how stacked it is. Obviously, getting the reduction in game spots highlights that. But for 20 spots that will go, there's 25 previous games athletes. And so people ask, it just goes round in conversation, like, who do you think is going to go? What are the predictions? But even on the male side, you'll have 4 previous games athletes not going, and that's if none of the rookies make it through. And there's a few rookies who are expected to go through. So Europe is going to be just stacked in a fight all the way down from 1st to
10th. Toby as well, then, kind of a similar scenario to Luca, just the two of them. It's kind of like, I guess it's just perform as good as you possibly can and just hope that the chips fall your way in the end.
Yeah, Toby's a bit of a different to Moritz and Luca in the sense he's still got a full-time job. So Luca's one of those athletes who gets a session in where he can. It's pretty phenomenal considering that. So Luca's going in, expectations to enjoy the experience, have a great time, but he's not necessarily going to be one of the athletes
Luca or
fighting for
Toby?
the game spot. Sorry, Toby is not necessarily going to be fighting for one of the spots. But yeah, he's one of those impressive athletes to watch, holding down a full-time job and kind of squeezing in the training and still getting to this level is very impressive.
On the team side then, you have CrossFit C23, the Progrm Ocean, which is probably takes longer to say than many of the workouts will take them to do. How's preparation been going there? That's obviously a different feel for C23 for you guys coaching. How have you found that year, and what are your expectations there? Like, do you have a number in your mind? Again, is it just like, just get over the line, doesn't matter? Or are you looking for that kind of, okay, yeah, we've pipped some really good teams here to a 1st, 2nd, or 3rd spot, and that gives us confidence?
Yeah, so it's actually been really nice for me. They've been working hands-on with a coach called Henrik, who's the lead coach of the team. And so I've just got to be there as a bit of a supporter and spectator. And it's been really good fun. They're very ambitious, have high hopes. They're a solid team. I think they'd want to see themselves on top of the podium, and it's just about putting in place. Teams are a lot more unknown going in. I think that's the interesting thing. You've had some teams formed of non-elite athletes who've done incredibly well, and teams of elite athletes who've struggled. So it's always hard to know how that dynamic comes together, and this will be their first live competition, as it will be for a lot of the teams that are competing.
On the female side then, Erica Ekeland, what can you tell us there?
So Erica has had a bit of a break. She suffered with an injury for a little period, which put her out. She was actually here in Mallorca. So Erica's been on board for like 5 years now, and she almost qualified during the online semifinals, which I believe was like 2020 or 2021.
Yeah.
So when it was all online, like with Germany and Lowlands online. But she's been just slowly rebuilding, and the hope is she can use this as a bit of a confidence gainer to go into the future next seasons and become one of the athletes to watch.
You kind of alluded to the cuts in allocations. When you're obviously a prominent voice in the strength of field of Europe over the last number of years, and that's where all of your athletes compete and your teams and everything else. What's the level of frustration like when you see an announcement like that?
It's more frustration in the sense, like, where's this decision coming from? I think it's very hard. We spend a lot of time with the athletes, and you've got athletes who look at this worldwide ranking system. So all you've got to understand, Europe last year was 60, and then they kind of all of a sudden cut this down to 40 in an extremely competitive region. So there's a large percentage of the athletes who are seeing that leaderboard like, last year I'd have gone, this year I'm not going. And then it's like another frustration comes in where Europe's now getting taken away spots for the games. So it's, everyone wants to see the sport grow. The athletes do, the coaches do, the training programs do, the media wants to see it grow. And so when some decisions are being made like this that cause frustration, it's hard to kind of keep that positivity going towards it. And no one really understands what positivity this brings into the space. I mean, obviously, like the people from Asia, Oceania, Latin America, like they understand that. But if you have conversations with people in that region, they also think it's a bit stupid doing this. Like, you're taking away from the most dominant regions. And there are still game spots allocated in Asia, whatever it may be. So it's not like you're reducing them to zero, but giving them more spots really, really makes no sense. So it's hard to understand why that decision was made. And again, there's no transparency on it. There's no, okay, we decided to change the system to semifinals, and this is the result. It's like, well, okay, great, thanks.